Hello, I'm Robert McKay. The channel is Christianity on the Bottom Shelf. And the meaning of that is I'm trying to put the cookies on the bottom shelf where everybody can reach them. The meaning of that metaphor is that I'm trying to make Christianity understandable to everyone, even people who know little or nothing about Christianity. Right now in the United States, this is September 20th, 2023, as I'm recording. Who knows when I'll post it. It won't be any sooner than Sunday, that much I know. Right now in the United States, we are dealing with government, whether the federal, state, county, or city, which is trying its dead level best to control everything we do, everything we say, even everything we think. They don't want us to even think about certain things, and so they try to withhold information from us that will enable us to think about those things. Well, how does a Christian live in such a country? How does a Christian live in a country which, unless something changes drastically, is going down the same road as Nazi Germany, the same road as the Soviet Union, the same road as North Korea? Name a dictatorship, we're headed that way. How does a Christian live in a country which more and more and more is actively persecuting those who believe the Bible? Thomas Jefferson, I believe it was, said that when tyranny becomes law, resistance becomes duty. Or maybe he said the other one, which is very similar: resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. Those are very similar statements. I'm not sure which, if either, he said. I think it might have been the second one. I don't have any references here. But in the first place, Thomas Jefferson was not necessarily the best guide to how a Christian should live. He literally took a pair of scissors and cut out of his Bible the parts he thought did not belong there. He chopped out the miracles. He chopped out a lot of what Jesus said. He was kind of a one-man Jesus seminar of his day. Jesus Seminar, by the way, was, maybe still is, a group of people who didn't believe the Bible to begin with, got together and voted on what they thought should be there, and most of it wasn't there anymore. Amazing how people trust this more than they trust God. And yet God knows so much more than us. But how do we live? Do we resist the government? Or do we yield to the government? I've come across people who, looking at the 13th chapter of Romans, and I don't have my Bible by me, where Paul says, in essence, obey the law. God put the government there for your benefit and to punish criminals. So far, so good. But people take that, and then they say no matter what the government does, a Christian may not resist, may not rebel, may not defy, may not nullify. I have a problem with that, because the Bible also says, and this is in the book of Acts, I think maybe around chapter 4, whatever. And when you read the sermons in the Bible, you don't find people giving chapter and book. They don't give references. They just say, it says. In the Psalms it says, David said. And that's kind of how my mind works. I can never remember the address. But in the book of Acts, Peter says, we must obey God rather than men. So if the government orders us to not do what God commands, or to do that which God commands we should not do, what do we as Christians do? Do we obey the government? Do we put our necks under the iron boot and say, okay, you're the government, we can't rebel, God put you there? God put tyrants where they are for his own purposes. I don't understand it, why he would permit his people to undergo some of the terrible persecutions they have endured and are enduring today. I don't know. I know that it is for his glory. How it glorifies him, I don't know. Who am I to call God to account to me anyway? What I do know is that if the government tells me that I must not worship God, my obligation is to obey God. If the government tells me I cannot meet with other Christians, well, God has said, do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together. Therefore, I'm under an obligation to disobey that government order. If the government says you may not preach the gospel, well, Jesus said, go and preach the gospel. It's a positive command. I have to disobey the government in that case. Not all things are going to necessarily be that clear cut. Was the Revolutionary War beginning in 1775, if I remember right, it went through 1781. Was that an ungodly rebellion against constituted government? You really could argue either side. The Bible does not give us a clear, a clear statement on that. Sometimes you just have to take biblical principles and apply them in your situation and hope you're understanding and applying the principle correctly. And sometimes we misunderstand. Sometimes we misapply. But I've come across people who said, yes, the Revolutionary War was a defiance of God. Was it right when the southern states withdrew from the Constitution, founded their own new confederation, and the United States then invaded that foreign country? Was it right for the Confederate States of America to defend themselves against the United States? Perhaps how you would answer that depends on your understanding of the Union. If you understand it as the Founding Fathers did, then those southern states had every right and authority to withdraw. And they did not invade the North. They wanted no war. The North invaded the South. If, on the other hand, you swallow Abraham Lincoln's theory that once you ratify the Constitution, there is no legal way to leave, which is like saying once you join the church, you don't get to leave, and if you try, they'll kill you. But if you go by that theory, then the southern states, as Lincoln said, never seceded genuinely, were in rebellion, and at that point, yes, we could say they should not have resisted the invasion. Which way you look at that depends on your political view. And so I can't give you a blanket statement on this, other than to repeat what Peter said in the book of Acts. We must obey God rather than men. So when your city, your county, your state, or the government of the United States tell you to do something contrary to the Word of God, at that point, if it's clearly contrary to God, then your decision is easy. Obey God and not men.